Some stories from American history are buried so deep they feel more like fiction. They challenge everything we thought we knew about a certain time and place. The story of Wall Street, for instance, is usually told as a saga of titans, of Vanderbilts and Morgans, a world that operated like a private country club, carved out exclusively by and for powerful white men. But what if I told you that in the decades before the Civil War, right in the heart of that financial pressure cooker, there was a black man who wasn't just a player, but a kingmaker, a millionaire so feared and formidable that his rivals gave him a name whispered in both awe and contempt? The Prince of Darkness. This isn't the story of a celebrated hero or some beloved icon of black success. This is the untold story of Jeremiah G. Hamilton, a man who clawed his way from total obscurity to a fortune of $2 million, the equivalent of around $60 million today. He owned railroad stock on trains he wasn't legally allowed to ride. He married a white woman when that was a dangerous, fireable offense. And he battled the most powerful tycoon in America, Cornelius Vanderbilt, to a dead standstill. But his path to riches was paved with ruthless deals, shocking betrayals, and a cold shoulder to the very community that should have been his own. Black intellectuals of his time scorned his relentless chase for wealth, and the black elite shunned him for his methods. He was a complete paradox, a symbol of impossible success in a deeply racist America, yet a man who operated almost entirely in the white business world, seemingly for himself and himself alone. So, how did a man with no known photograph, whose story has been almost entirely erased, become New York's richest and most notorious black millionaire? The answer is a journey that starts not in a boardroom, but with a daring escape from a death sentence. The year is 1828. In the bustling harbor of Port-au-Prince, Haiti, a young man, just 21 years old, is in hiding. For 12 agonizing days, he's been skulking around the docks, sheltered by local fishermen, a fugitive. A death sentence hangs over his head, issued by the Haitian courts. Proclamations are nailed to posts across the island, offering a $300 reward for his capture. His crime? A counterfeit coin scheme so audacious, so brilliant, that it nearly crashed the nation's currency. This man is Jeremiah G. Hamilton, and this brush with death isn't his downfall. It's his education. It's the moment he gets a taste for high stakes, the thrill of the hustle, and the power of quick cash. Tipped off just moments before soldiers arrived to grab him, he managed to dump a chunk of the counterfeit coins into the harbor and slip away, eventually boarding a ship headed for New York. He was reportedly still carrying $5,000 of the fake currency. He was leaving behind a death sentence, but he was carrying with him the seed of an empire built on pure nerve, intellect, and a complete disregard for the rules. To understand a man who would one day terrorize Wall Street, you have to understand the world that made him. Haiti in the 1820s was more than just an island. It was a powerful symbol. As the first and only nation born from a successful slave revolt, it stood as a beacon of black freedom. For Hamilton, who was likely born in Haiti or the West Indies, to choose this sacred ground as a stage for a criminal scheme was seen as a profound betrayal. A group of white New York merchants had picked the charismatic, French-speaking 20-year-old to be the face of their operation. They chartered a ship, the Eliza Jane, and tasked Hamilton with smuggling a massive cargo of counterfeit Haitian coins into the country. The plan was almost perfect. The fake coins were such high quality that their silver content was actually higher than the real currency. It was like forging a Rolex, but accidentally making it with more real gold than the original, a fatal flaw that gave the game away when a sharp-eyed bank clerk tested them. The scheme unraveled. While his white backers in New York were safely insulated from the consequences, Hamilton, the man on the ground, was left to face the music. A Haitian court sentenced him to be shot on sight if he ever returned. The black elite, both in America and the Caribbean, were disgusted. They shunned him, not just for crime, but for disgracing Haiti and for protecting the powerful white men who'd hired him. But Hamilton didn't feel shame. He learned a lesson. He had been the pawn, the disposable front man. He escaped not with regret, but with a hardened resolve. He would never be anyone's pawn again. He would be the player. When he landed in New York City, it was a place of explosive growth and brutal contrasts. It was the nation's financial center, its port buzzing with ambition. But it was also a city where black people, even the free, lived under the constant shadow of racism. The financial world of Wall Street was a lawless frontier, less like an organized exchange and more like a chaotic flea market where con men could pass as brokers. For a black man to even dream of entering this world was pure madness. Yet, this is exactly where Jeremiah Hamilton set his sights. For the first half of the 1830s, he struggled. A trail of lawsuits over unpaid debts shows his frantic attempts to get a foothold, like a man trying to climb a sheer cliff face. He was constantly borrowing, sweet-talking new investors while putting off old creditors. His critics were sure he was just running a shell game, and they were sort of right. Hamilton was honing his craft, learning to operate in a system designed to shut him out. He understood that in a world that saw him as untrustworthy because of his skin color, he'd have to be smarter, more ruthless, and bolder than any of his white rivals. He couldn't play their game by their rules. He had to make his own. And his first big move would rise from the ashes of a city in flames. On a bitterly cold December night in 1835, a fire broke out in a warehouse in Lower Manhattan. Fanned by hurricane-force winds, the blaze grew into a monster. The Great Fire in New York raged for 2 days, wiping out nearly 700 buildings across 17 city blocks. For thousands, it was a tragedy that brought financial ruin. For Jeremiah Hamilton, it was the opportunity of a lifetime. With an office already on Wall Street, Hamilton moved with the speed of a predator. While everyone else was drowning in ruin, he was a shark in bloody water. Property records were lost, deeds were destroyed, and panicked landowners were desperate for cash. Hamilton took what one historian called pitiless advantage of their misery. He bought up land and assets from fire victims for pennies on the dollar. One of his tactics was brutally effective. He turned down deals from investors who could no longer produce the required paperwork that had been burned in the fire, using their losses as leverage. From this one disaster, it's estimated he pocketed the equivalent of $5 million in today's money. This single act cemented his reputation. The press, which had already villainized him after the Haiti affair, now had a new name for him: the Prince of Darkness. It was a name that nodded to his skin color, but also to his terrifying skill. While other black entrepreneurs focused on building businesses in their own community, Hamilton cut a path straight through the lily-white business world. With his new fortune, Hamilton didn't slow down. He dove headfirst into the national real estate boom, buying 47 lots in Queens and huge properties up the Hudson River. He was betting big, but his timing was terrible. Only weeks after his huge investments, the Panic of 1837 hit, a devastating financial crash. Once again, Hamilton was on the brink of ruin, but where others were destroyed, Hamilton used the system against itself. In 1841, Congress passed a new, incredibly generous bankruptcy law. Hamilton treated it like a get-out-of-jail-free card. On the fourth day it was in effect, he registered for bankruptcy, and just a few months later, all his massive debts were legally wiped away. Some historians speculate he then rebounded by buying back his own former properties at rock-bottom prices. He was wiped out on paper, only to emerge stronger. His ruthlessness wasn't just in real estate. He developed a nasty reputation in maritime insurance. He would insure ships that then had a funny habit of mysteriously sinking. The rumor was that he was essentially buying life insurance on terminally ill ships and then giving them a final push overboard to collect the huge payouts. By 1835, the 9 biggest insurance firms were so convinced of his fraud that they publicly blackballed him, vowing to never insure any venture with his name on it. This led to a constant war in the courts. Hamilton was always suing someone. In 1843, the Atlantic Insurance Company accused him of trying to fraud them of $50,000, though they eventually dropped the case. Hamilton, in turn, claimed the company had hired thugs to try and drown him in the East River. Whether true or not, it just added to his legend. He didn't just play the game. He fought it with every weapon he could find. He had transformed from a fugitive into a financial predator, and his next target was the most powerful man in America. By the 1850s, one name stood above all others in American business: Cornelius Vanderbilt. Known as a Commodore, he was a titan of shipping and railroads. And yet, a front-page obituary for Vanderbilt made a stunning observation. There was only one man who ever fought the Commodore to the end, and that was Jeremiah Hamilton. Vanderbilt himself grudgingly admitted he respected Hamilton's skill. Their battle was a heavyweight boxing match in the financial arena. Their epic fight was over a venture called the Accessory Transit Company. During the California Gold Rush, Vanderbilt had set up this company as a brilliant shortcut for prospectors to get to California. It made a ton of money. Jeremiah Hamilton saw an opening. He started buying up shares, but he wasn't just investing. He was scheming. Hamilton had perfected a kind of financial jiu-jitsu. His signature move was to buy a company's shares and then immediately sue it, tripping it into court so its assets would be sold off to shareholders, namely himself. It was legalized corporate warfare, and he was a master. The battle for the Accessory Transit Company was a high-stakes stock market brawl between these two giants. Here was a black man, the Prince of Darkness, going toe-to-toe with the country's most powerful white tycoon for his prize company. While the exact details are lost to history, the outcome isn't. Hamilton, through his relentless legal and financial pressure, fought the Commodore to a standstill. This was Hamilton's genius. He made himself indispensable. White brokers, who may have been racist, faced a choice. They could stick to the racial hierarchy or they could make money. Hamilton made them a lot of money. When it came down to it, they cared more about the color of his money than the color of his skin. He loved this power dynamic. He understood the absurdity of his position and used it like a weapon. There are stories of him demanding gifts like cigars or champagne from potential white clients before he would even grant them a meeting. This wasn't just greed. It was about flipping the script, forcing the white elite of New York to court him. His audacity was limitless. He was blacklisted by the main New York Stock Exchange, so he just operated on the side. When one of these secondary boards passed a rule to expel any member who traded for him, a newspaper editor wryly noted it was because Hamilton is a colored man. But it didn't matter. Brokers kept dealing with him because he delivered profits. He was a force of nature who had mastered the art of making money in a system designed to keep him out. By the time of the Civil War, Jeremiah G. Hamilton wasn't just on Wall Street. He was one of its kings. Jeremiah Hamilton's wealth defied every rule of 19th century America. By the 1860s, with his fortune of $2 million, he owned a mansion in New Jersey, an upscale home in Manhattan, and yachts. And, in the most cutting display of his strange status, he owned huge amounts of stock in railroad companies whose trains he legally couldn't ride in the same way a white person could. His personal life was just as defiant. He was married to a white woman, Eliza J. Morris, and they had 8 children, a radical act that angered people on both sides of the color line. Socially, he was a white racist's worst nightmare come to life. Yet, this power had its limits. His wealth was a fortress, but the moment he stepped off Wall Street, he was vulnerable. This came crashing down during the New York City draft riots of 1863. The riots turned into a horrifying race pogrom as mobs of white rioters hunted and lynched any black person they could find. Their targets included the richest black man in the city. A mob descended on Hamilton's home, intent on lynching him. But Hamilton, ever the survivor, had escaped out the back. The story goes that his wife, Eliza, confronted the mob at the front door. Thinking fast, she told them her husband wasn't home and cleverly calmed the murderous crowd by offering them liquor, cigars, and one of her husband's old suits. The mob left. Hamilton survived, but it was a brutal reminder. His millions could buy him mansions, but they couldn't buy him safety. This isolation wasn't just from white society. He was also profoundly cut off from the black community. Leaders like Frederick Douglass viewed him with contempt. In an era defined by the fight for freedom, Hamilton's self-serving pursuit of wealth seemed tacky. Unlike later black millionaires who built fortunes by serving the black community, Hamilton's deals were almost all with whites. There's no record of him funding abolitionist causes. He was seen as an outsider who had succeeded in the white man's world by playing the white man's game. This leaves us with the central question of his life. Was he a sellout, achieving personal success at the cost of collective progress? Or was he a pragmatist who knew that in 19th century America, he had to be utterly ruthless just to exist? He was a man without a community. Feared on Wall Street, hated on the streets of New York, and disdained by the very people who shared his heritage. He was utterly, magnificently, and perhaps tragically alone. The story of Jeremiah Hamilton forces us to ask some tough questions about wealth, race, and what it really means to succeed against impossible odds. His life has been largely scrubbed from our history books because it's a complicated, uncomfortable story that doesn't fit neatly into our modern ideas of heroes and villains. If you think these forgotten histories need to be told, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Your support helps us bring these incredible, untold stories back into the light. On May 19, 1875, Jeremiah G. Hamilton died from pneumonia. The obituaries told two different stories. Some were filled with contempt, with one headline spitting, "The notorious colored capitalist is dead and buried." But others acknowledged his undeniable genius. All of them agreed on one thing. At the time of his death, he was the richest black man in the United States. He was buried in his family plot in Brooklyn's Greenwood Cemetery. In a final, fittingly mysterious act, no known image of him survives. No paintings, no sketches, not a single photograph. It's as if the man who made such a loud, disruptive noise in life just vanished into silence. And what happened to his incredible fortune? In a twist that feels like a fable, the wealth was like a flash flood. It rose with terrifying speed, but it receded just as quickly. Unlike the dynastic fortunes of the Vanderbilts or Rockefellers, the Hamilton empire crumbled. By the time his wife Eliza died, there was almost nothing left. His children and grandchildren seemed to have lived off the wealth, but none of them inherited his ferocious drive. The money simply vanished within a generation. So what is the legacy of the Prince of Darkness? He wasn't a hero in the traditional sense. He wasn't a freedom fighter or a community builder. He was a ruthless capitalist who thrived in a dog-eat-dog world, a system that was predatory by its very nature. He was as crooked and as brilliant as any other man on Wall Street, but he had to be more so because he was doing it while black. Perhaps his story isn't meant to be inspirational, but a stark lesson in survival. He embodied a by any means necessary mentality long before Malcolm X made the phrase famous. He was a black man who walked into the lion's den of American capitalism, faced down the lions, and didn't just survive, he feasted. He beat them at their own game, a game that was rigged against him from the start. Jeremiah Hamilton's life forces us to look beyond simple stories. He was a pioneer, a financial manipulator, a husband, a father, and a walking contradiction. His story is a testament to the power of one person to bend the world to his will, but also a cautionary tale about the spiritual cost of that ambition. He achieved the American dream in a time when it was explicitly not for him. But in doing so, he became a prince in a lonely kingdom of his own making. His life, buried for over a century, remains one of the most complex, uncomfortable, and ultimately one of the most American stories ever told.